Chapter 1. The Absolute Alpha. The cold weight of the Alpha's citadel was the air Kael breathed. It was an iron lung, vast and silent, carved into the remote, unforgiving spine of the Bitter Peak Mountains. Kael sat on the obsidian throne, the stone cool against his leather-clad back. His scent, cedar, ozone, and authority was the only thing in the cavernous council hall that seemed warm. He watched the two feuding faction leaders, Torvin and Lyra, clawing at each other's throats over hunting territory, their voices sharp as broken glass. He needed to enforce absolute stability. Disorder was the sickness that killed packs. "Enough," Kael commanded. It was a single word, but it dropped like a boulder, silencing the room. The two wolves shrank beneath the low, rumbling growl that barely left Kael's chest. Control. That was the Alpha Crest's birthright. Power must be absolute and solitary. Truth be told, he felt detached, almost bored, yet perfectly confident in the necessary isolation that came with ultimate command. He leveraged Torvin's documented history of boundary creep, and he reminded Lyra of her pack's dependence on the Citadel's protection. Just like that, the complex dispute was settled. Torvin conceded the northern quadrant, and Lyra promised resources. What followed was the silence of submission, the most satisfying sound in the world. He was the undisputed pillar, alone and unbreakable, because that's what his ancestors had failed to be. A strange tightness gripped Kael's chest then, a brief, alien pang. Was this all there was? He instantly smothered the reflection. Such thoughts were a luxury for the weak. But then the bronze doors of the council hall were thrown open without proper clearance. Rhys, his second-in-command, a tall wolf with eyes like chipped slate, strode forward, every line of his body taut. Rhys wasn't often ruffled, which meant whatever he carried was significant. In the quiet that followed the meeting's close, Rhys's raw urgency hung heavy, immediately disrupting the perfect control Kael had just established. Kael waved a dismissive hand at the departing factions, but kept his golden eyes locked on his beta. "Speak, Rhys," Kael said, the tone flat and expectant. "Alpha," Rhys breathed, bowing low, a respect that felt sharp and calculated. A matter of extreme sensitivity. A potential threat to the line. Rhys's voice was low, laced with the metallic tang of concern, and Kael felt the familiar annoyance prickle his skin. Another manufactured crisis? But Rhys's eyes betrayed him. They were too wide, too focused. Not only that, Rhys was trembling slightly. Kael gestured toward the private side chamber. Rhys's agitation was the first subtle sign that the iron lung of the citadel was about to draw a shaky breath. Chapter 2. The Unseen Mark. The side chamber was small, lined with sound-dampening velvet the color of dried blood. The air was heavy with the smell of old parchment, and Kael could hear the faintest buzz of the citadel's power core running beneath the stone floor. He stood with his back to the wall, creating a physical presence that demanded Rhys state his business immediately. Rhys didn't waste time. He pulled a heavy-duty tablet from his jacket and activated a single, highly pixelated video feed. "The anomaly," Rhys whispered, his voice catching. The footage was grainy, taken from a long distance. It showed a brightly lit street corner in a bustling human city, a chaos Kael had long forsaken. A woman with dark hair stood holding the hand of a small girl, no older than 7. Meanwhile, the roar of the human traffic was muted through the surveillance. As the wind shifted slightly in the video, the girl turned her head, briefly pulling the strap of a faded backpack off her shoulder. "Zoom in," Kael commanded, his voice tight. Rhys complied. The image warped into a frustrating blur of pink and gray, but then the light caught a distinct, stylized scar or birthmark just beneath the girl's collarbone. It was the exact crest, the stylized wolf's head with the 3 claw marks beneath it, that was tattooed ritualistically into Kael's own skin, marking him as the supreme alpha. Kael felt a jarring, visceral shock.
Impossible.
"It's a coincidence," Kael instantly dismissed, forcing the lie out. "It's a common tribal symbol, or a cheap parlor tattoo." But then his eyes fell back on the shape, the tiny, identical etching. She didn't know what scared her more, The idea that the mark was real, or that he hadn't immediately known the truth. Rhys shook his head, looking directly at Kael's chest, where the Alpha Crest lived beneath his tunic. With every heartbeat, Rhys continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, low tone. Alpha, my informants confirm the mother, Maya, was raised entirely outside the fold. Human documentation, human life. This girl, this pup, is a mistake. A stray thread in a perfectly woven tapestry. Rhys leaned closer, his scent sharp with zealous conviction. We must eliminate them both. Immediately. Before the pack, or worse, the ancients, catch wind of this deviation. Because of that, the bloodline's purity must be maintained. You, Alpha, are the sole line. Any rival, real or perceived, is a threat to the stability we fought for. Kael felt a deep, unsettling prick of irrational doubt. It wasn't just the mark, it was Rhys's immediate, almost zealous, move to violence. Was Rhys acting out of loyalty, or was this a test? He knew Rhys was decisive, and Rhys was highly effective, but then the man's violence always felt too easy, too calculated. Your loyalty is noted, Beta, Kael stated, the authority flooding back into his voice like cold water. But you are too quick to dismiss the possibility of a ritualistic copycat. Do not move. I handle this personally. He paused, letting the implication hang. Stand down, Rhys. Focus your resources on the North Gate. What's worse, this foolishness has distracted you. Rhys looked wounded, but then nodded, recognizing the finality in Kael's voice. Without another word, Rhys gathered the tablet and left the chamber, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. Kael stood still, the scent of Rhys's ambition lingering like burnt oil. Kael's goal had been to dismiss the anomaly, but then the footage and Rhys's reaction had only amplified the threat. A single lie, Kael. The mark was identical. He knew it with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, because the power of the crest was his power. He had to know the truth. He had to see it up close. Kael's focus immediately shifted from pack stability to ancestral truth, a truth that could shatter his reign. He turned toward the dark passage, leading to the Citadel's ancient heart. Chapter 3. Shadow of a Myth. That night, the Citadel was silent, save for the hum of the ventilation system. Kael was no longer in his throne room. He was swallowed by the archives, a vast network of stone chambers that smelled of dust, iron, and 1,000 years of pack secrets. The only light came from the antique silver lanterns Kael carried, which cast long, dancing shadows of ancient wolves on the rough-hewn walls. Still, the image of the little girl's shoulder crest burned behind his eyelids. He ignored the tactical reports waiting on his desk, ignored the gnawing hunger of his own wolf, because the mark demanded his entire focus. He was determined to find a logical explanation, an obscure ritual or historical deviation that would restore the perfect mental stability he craved. He pulled open the massive iron doors of the forbidden section, the air inside suddenly colder, laced with the metallic scent of forgotten blood magic. He sought the records of the lost lineage, a myth his father had taught him was eliminated to preserve the supreme Alpha line. What followed was hours of turning brittle, yellowed pages, his gloves protecting the fragile parchment. He discovered stories of a minor splinter faction, centuries ago, who believed the crest represented kinship, not kingship. Heresy. He felt the rage build in his gut, a familiar fire that was always easiest to control. But then, he found a specific passage, a cryptic reference to a ritual performed on lost pups whose survival outside the pack was guaranteed by a secret protector faction. The ritual gave them an identical, dormant mark, a biological anchor to the Alpha bloodline, even if they were raised human. Dormant. Humans. Meanwhile, Kael thought of his own childhood, raised rigidly in the Citadel, every decision weighted by the necessity of his power. He remembered a story the elder, Vanya, had whispered to him when he was 7, a story of a small, frightened wolf cub who was carried away from the Citadel in the dead of night to save him from a rival attack. Vanya said the cub was lost forever. Maybe it was fate that the image of that story always contained a small, comforting firefly, a source of light in the darkness. Not only that, the discovery made Kael's own isolation feel heavier, more crushing. If this lineage existed, and if the mark represented unity, then his entire reign, based on solitary power, was fundamentally flawed. His flaw wasn't a flaw, it was a lie. Kael's goal had shifted from debunking the mark to confronting the fact that a rival branch existed, forcing him to choose between eliminating them and preserving his absolute power, or accepting them and shattering the pack's stability. The stakes became intensely personal. My power or my blood. Just like that, everything changed. Kael slammed the book shut, the sound echoing through the cold stone. He couldn't trust the documents. They could be a fabrication. He couldn't trust Reese. The beta would use this secret for his own gain. With a single glance at the iron doors, Kael knew what he had to do. He had to see the mother, Maya. He had to look into her eyes and confirm the truth of the mark. Not the mark on the child, but the one he knew had to be on the woman, the lost pup, who carried the biological code. He had to confirm the threat, because he couldn't rule if he lived on a foundation of doubt. His next step would break every rule of pack secrecy he had ever enforced. Chapter 4. The Human Glimpse. Kael moved like a shadow detached from the Citadel's mountain spine. He'd rarely taken his true form this close to the human sprawl. The air here was foul, a chemical scent of exhaust and fried grease, nothing like the crisp ozone of the peaks. But then, that putrid atmosphere provided perfect cover. He was a massive, scarred wolf now, black as volcanic rock, his fur absorbing the weak urban light. He didn't dare shift to human near the border, because his scent signature was too strong, too unmistakably alpha. Containment. Secrecy. That was the only goal now. He found the coordinates Reese had logged. It was a mundane apartment building, its fire escape a rusted, precarious skeleton. Through the shifting crowd, Kael scanned, using his heightened senses to filter the noise and find the specific, subtle beat of human hearts. He located the familiar, tiny signature of the child's life and the steadier, resilient pulse of the mother, Maya. Moments later, they emerged. Maya looked exactly as she had on the grainy video, tired, strong, with a weariness around her eyes that spoke of a fight Kael knew nothing about. The girl, bundled in a pink jacket, clutched Maya's hand like a lifeline. Kael tracked them, his golden eyes fixed on Maya's neck. He needed confirmation, because a birthmark on a child was one thing, a mark of the adult alpha bloodline on an outsider was the truth he feared. As the world narrowed to just Maya and the girl, the mother pulled a scarf tighter around her throat, a gesture of human habit. But as she adjusted it, Kael saw it. There, high on her collarbone, was the faintest outline of the crest. It wasn't dark or ritualized like his. It was a pale, almost silvery scar tissue, a mark barely visible against her skin. In that moment, the cold, solitary certainty of Kael's life shattered. She is kin. A wave of primal confusion slammed into him. It wasn't a threat he registered, it was a connection. The sight of this human woman protecting her child, unknowingly carrying his mark, hit him like a physical blow. Just like that, his goal instantly shifted from dismissal to containment and absolute secrecy. He had to seize them now because the pack, Reese, could never discover this truth before Kael himself understood its full scope. This was the inciting incident. Kael had been pushed past the point of no return. Instead of retreating to strategize, Kael moved. He bypassed his typical human retrieval teams. He shifted slightly, retaining his lethal speed and strength, and intercepted them in the dimly lit alley behind the building. The abduction was brutal, fast, and silent, leaving no human witnesses. Kael snatched them both, moving with a desperate, crushing efficiency. He knew the truth was lethal, and now he was holding the proof. Chapter 5. Confrontation in the Cage. The journey back was a blur of high-speed transport and shifting scents. Kael brought Maya and the girl to the Fringe Sanctuary, a brutal, utilitarian safe house built into a derelict warehouse on the shifter border. The room they were confined in was sterile, concrete, and locked down with 5 different layers of protection. Still, when Kael finally stood before Maya, she showed no fear. She was huddled over her sleeping daughter, her posture all fierce, unwavering protection. "Who are you?" Maya demanded, her voice hoarse but determined. "What is this? You'll let us go right now." Kael felt a flicker of surprise. Human fear usually preceded compliance. He needed to establish dominance and extract information. He planted his hands on the metal table between them. "I am the one who keeps you alive. I am Kael, and I need to know about the mark you and your daughter carry." Maya's eyes, the color of wet earth, flashed defiance. She pulled her collar high, covering the telltale silvery line. "It's a birth defect. You kidnapped us over a birthmark." "Don't insult me," Kael growled, low and menacing. "That is the crest of the Vanguard Alpha bloodline. It is sacred. It is unique. Because of that, you are not who you claim to be." As the silence stretched, Kael felt the familiar fury rise. He was used to subordinates wilting under his stare. On the other hand, Maya's resilience was a wall. She didn't flinch. "I am Maya Sinclair. My life is human. I have no idea what Vanguard is, but I know you are a monster who stole my child." Monster. The word stung, because deep down, Kael knew he was doing this to protect his lineage, even if it meant betraying his own principles. Instead of threatening her, Kael found himself explaining, his voice low and dangerous. "That mark is proof of a lost pup. Proof of my kin. Your existence destabilizes everything. Do you understand? It threatens the safety of thousands." "My daughter is all that matters," Maya shot back. "Your thousands mean nothing to me." Her focus, her maternal fortitude, was absolute. It was a strength that was utterly alien to Kael, whose strength was forged in solitary power. His usual intimidation tactics were useless against her sheer, primal will. Kael realized he couldn't simply eliminate her. The mark triggered a deep, protective instinct linked to his very core. He paced the small room. He can't kill his own blood. That went against something ancient and vital. He made a decision that betrayed his core belief. Investigation, not elimination. He needed answers only the Citadel could provide. He turned to leave. "You stay here. You will not speak of this to anyone. Not even her," he ordered, nodding toward the sleeping girl. Yet, just before the door sealed, Maya delivered a final, stinging blow. "You think isolation makes you strong, Alpha? It just makes you paranoid." Kael flinched. The door was sealed with a heavy hydraulic hiss. He chose to investigate, and in doing so, he chose his kin over his creed. Chapter 6. Crossing the Threshold. The Citadel felt suffocating now, its silence no longer a comfort, but a betrayal. Kael returned, his human clothes smelling faintly of the city and something else, Maya's scent. It was wild ginger and something subtly feminine, entirely unlike the musky, dominant scents of his pack. He immediately called Reese into his private study, the center of his solitary power. Reese looked expectant, almost eager. "The anomaly," Kael stated, keeping his expression neutral, his voice devoid of the complex confusion churning in his gut. "It was a mistake. A low-level ritualist, nothing more." Reese frowned, his slate eyes narrowing. "Alpha, the crest." "I had my specialist check the code," Kael lied smoothly, the deception sliding off his tongue like ice. "It's a cheap copy, a distraction. There is no lost lineage. I am the sole Alpha. You were too hasty, Reese. Your paranoia nearly wasted resources." Kael used his authority like a whip. "Focus on the north gate, as ordered." Reese bowed, but then the compliance felt strained. "Understood, Alpha. Forgive my zeal. I simply seek to maintain our strength, because that strength is rooted in your unchallenged purity." Reese's words sounded loyal, but then the subtext roared, "I will challenge you if you show weakness." Kael watched Reese leave, a cold knot forming in his stomach. He had lied directly to his beta, the second most powerful figure in the Vanguard Pack. As a result, Kael was now actively deceiving his most powerful subordinates, creating a deep, dangerous secret that directly threatened his entire power structure. He had crossed a point of no return, choosing his irrational curiosity over pack transparency. He walked toward his large desk, the smooth, dark wood reflecting his isolated image. He pulled a hidden lock, revealing a small, ancient leather-bound journal. This was his true goal, his father's research into the lost histories. He had dismissed these texts as irrelevant myths, the dangerous musings of his ancestors. Now they were the key. He ran a thumb over the leather. With his scent in the air, the room felt heavy with his loneliness. He had the mark on his body, the lineage in his bones, and now, the truth was locked in a concrete room with a defiant human woman. His solitary reign was compromised because a secret this large always breeds chaos. He had invited chaos. Let the research begin. The only way out was through the dangerous history he had sworn to forget. The answers lay in the cold, dead past, and he knew that history would likely demand a living price. Chapter 7. The Study of the Subject. The screen glowed, bathing Kael's face in cold, pale light. He was back in his private study, but his focus was not on the Citadel's war maps or resource reports. It was entirely on the high-definition feed beamed from the fringe sanctuary. Kael watched Maya. He'd installed discreet surveillance, not to maintain security, but to study his captive. She was restless, a caged wildcat. She paced the perimeter of the small room, her bare feet silent on the concrete. Her human pulse was steady, resilient, and her scent of wild ginger and determination, faint even through the sterile Citadel filters, bothered him. He was clinically detached, yet plagued by involuntary bursts of empathy for the child, who sat coloring quietly in the corner. The girl is innocent. That thought was a weakness he couldn't afford. But then, Maya paused. She was alone, thinking the cameras wouldn't pick up the small movements. She looked down at her collarbone. With a single glance, she gently rubbed the silvery outline of the Alpha Crest, attempting to smudge or cover the scar tissue, believing it was the reason they were imprisoned. Deep down, she knew the truth, that she was trying to hide the mark, fearing it marked her as other. As the silence stretched, Kael realized his usual methods of coercion wouldn't work. Threatening this woman would only solidify her defiance. He had kidnapped her to dominate her, yet she was forcing him to adapt and use patience, a virtue he despised. His power was useless against her human, primal stubbornness. That's why he couldn't simply kill her. The biological tether felt too strong, too crucial to the mystery. What followed was Kael's reluctant decision. He needed to understand her intellectual vulnerabilities, not her physical ones. He shut down the feed, the abrupt darkness making the room feel heavier. He needed to find a tool, a crack in her facade, because his archival research was proving slow and cryptic. From there, Kael mentally ran through a list of possible gifts or tools he could send to the sanctuary, something that might provoke a reaction and insight. He couldn't shake the image of her defiant eyes and the quiet concentration of the child. His solitary mind was finally being fractured by the messiness of kinship. Chapter 8. The Manufactured Crisis. Kael was poring over a map of the ancient pack migration routes when his private comm unit blared. It was an unauthorized breach alert, and the call came from Reese. Alpha. Perimeter violation, North Gate. Hunter shifters, Reese barked, his voice tight with controlled alarm. They breached the secondary wards. They know the old way in. Kael felt a spike of anger and mounting stress that instantly pulled him from his ancestral research. The North Gate was heavily fortified, and hunter shifters rarely attempted such a direct approach. He needed to decisively neutralize the threat and reassert his focus on the pack. He shifted seamlessly into command mode. Reese, use the sonic emitters on the perimeter. Do not engage hand-to-hand until they cross the river boundary. Despite that, the hunters were faster than anticipated. Kael watched the tactical map update in real time. Reese's response seemed strangely delayed, almost deliberately sluggish. Meanwhile, the hunters made significant progress toward a supply depot. Kael felt the suspicion sharpen to an edge. Was Reese testing him? Kael issued rapid-fire counterorders, bypassing Reese and addressing the patrol leaders directly. Because of that, Kael resolved the crisis successfully, driving the hunters back and securing the supply route with only minimal damage. It was a small victory, but then it came at a high cost. He slammed the map table, the wood groaning under his hand. The crisis was real, but then Reese's handling of it was suspicious. It had drained Kael's attention for 4 crucial hours. Reese knows I am distracted. Kael realized this foolishness was designed to force him to choose: deal with the domestic threat, or deal with his secret. Soon after, Kael saw the visible impact of the stress. He caught his reflection in a dark window. His usual cold, controlled mask was strained, and a shadow clung beneath his eyes. The pack saw Kael looking strained for the first time, and that was a weakness Reese would exploit. Instead of resting, Kael headed directly for the second's quarters. The confrontation had to be immediate, because if he allowed Reese to create crises, his entire reign would unravel from the inside. Chapter 9. The First Shared Word. Kael entered Reese's office. The scent of Reese's own power, a heavy, metallic dominance, was almost overpowering, and it was underscored by a subtle note of calculated frustration. "Your handling of the North Gate was inefficient," Kael stated, bypassing pleasantries. He stood close, asserting his superior height and scent. "You exposed a valuable supply cache." Reese met his gaze, his eyes wide and earnest. He was a master of controlled emotion. "Alpha, I assure you, I was following protocol. The hunters used a sequence of lures we haven't seen since the old raids." Reese spread his hands in a gesture of sincere frustration. "I fear our enemies sense weakness. They are watching for any deviation, any lapse in the Alpha's focus. More importantly, we must be vigilant." Reese's response was flawless. He deflected the blame, reinforced the idea of external threats, and subtly suggested the Alpha's focus was the true problem. Kael knew it was a lie, but then he couldn't prove it. "Return to your duties," Kael ordered, his voice clipped. He left the tension between them a palpable thing, like an unsprung trap. He didn't return to the archives. He went back to the sanctuary, because Reese had successfully destabilized the Citadel, and Kael needed to find his own new source of stability. Maya was awake. Kael stood outside the locked door, holding a single, antique book wrapped in thick brown paper, a text on ancient symbols and forgotten Pack dialects. He wasn't giving her a key, he was giving her a test. He needed to find a weakness or crack in her human facade. He slid the book through the silent drop slot. A beat later, Maya picked it up, her eyebrows arching in confusion. As the air thickened between them, separated only by the thick metal door, Kael heard her speak, her voice low and hesitant, and laced with a fragile human curiosity. "This symbol, this wolf's eye," she murmured, tracing a sketch on the cover. "It's on my great-grandmother's jewelry box. What does it mean?" Not the pack meaning, the real meaning. Kael felt a strange intellectual respect and deeper confusion. She hadn't asked who he was, or when she could leave. She asked about the real meaning. Not only that, she had asked about an obscure symbol from a different lineage entirely, one only scholars knew. "It means protection," Kael finally responded, his voice rough. Protection. The one thing he was currently failing to deliver to his own family, because he believed protection required isolation. In the quiet that followed, Maya surprised him again. "Is that why you took us? Because you think you're protecting us from the thing this symbol means?" Kael felt his chest ache. Her human perspective cut through his alpha logic, laying bare his desperation. The interaction humanized Maya in Kael's eyes, making his isolation feel heavier and his potential choice, elimination, harder. She wasn't just a captive, she was a mirror showing him his own frantic actions. Before he could speak another word, Kael retreated hastily. He had asked a question with the book, and she had answered with a painful, undeniable truth. He needed to be alone, back in the dusty heart of the Citadel, because he was now racing the clock against Reese's ambition and the truth buried in his own family's history. His next discovery would be the one that changed everything. Chapter 10. The Missing Pages. Kael was living on black coffee and adrenaline. The Citadel's archives, once a sanctuary of cold, controlled knowledge, now felt like a suffocating tomb of lies. He was determined to find the truth before the pack found the connection. Maya's question about protection had echoed in his mind, fueling his search. He narrowed his focus to the records detailing the Great Purge, the event that supposedly extinguished the entire branch of the Alpha family centuries ago, solidifying Kael's solitary line. He spent 3 consecutive days tracing census reports, ritual documents, and property transfers. But then, he hit a deliberate roadblock. The leather-bound journal he now held was old, its pages stiff with age. The text detailed the purge, listing names and dates of elimination, but when Kael reached the final century, the records became suspiciously sparse. The pages, the entire log for the year 1942, had been meticulously sliced out with a hot blade, leaving only jagged, burned remnants. "Cowards," Kael hissed, the sound a low, frustrated growl. He was frustrated and paranoid. This wasn't natural decay, this was deliberate redaction. Someone knew. Someone from his ancestors had lied to him, not to protect the pack, but to protect their own singular claim. He realized the threat to his power was not just external, but internal and historical. Because of that, Kael had to rely on speculation and instinct, not his usual controlled logic. The person who removed these pages believed the lost lineage survived, and they tried to protect that truth. Who knew? The lineage was still a living secret. To make things worse, Reese's subtle attacks hadn't stopped. The Citadel was buzzing with rumors about the Alpha's unprecedented distraction, and Reese's scent of quiet, building power, was everywhere. Kael's goal now shifted to retrieving the true, original records, the hidden source, before Reese's campaign fractured the pack entirely. Instead of delving deeper into the corrupted archives, Kael decided he needed to retrieve the one thing he always avoided, a forbidden artifact sealed deep beneath the Vanguard burial grounds. This action, signaling his heightened risk-taking, was the only way to bypass the decades of lies. Chapter 11. The Kinship Revealed. The burial grounds were deep beneath the Citadel, colder and quieter than the archives. The air here smelled of damp earth and the lingering essence of long-gone power. Kael retrieved the runestone of the first Alpha, a small, black stone said to hold the raw, unfiltered truth of the bloodline. Back in his study, he laid the runestone on the desk. He pressed his marked chest to the cold stone, initiating the translation ritual. The runestone pulsed once, a deep, silent thrum that reverberated through his entire body. Images flooded his mind, not text, but raw memory. He saw a woman, his ancestor, performing a painful ritual on an infant girl, carving the crest into her skin with a silver-tipped needle. The ancestor spoke of a splinter of hope, hidden to save the bloodline from the very self-destructive cycle of solitary rule Kael himself embodied. The major revelation hit Kael with the force of a battering ram. Maya was a direct descendant of that infant girl, his long-lost sister or a direct, close relative. The runestone showed him the true meaning of the mark. It wasn't a symbol of singular dominance. It was a physical testament to the bloodline's need for unity. Kael initially felt profound shock and rage at the generational deception. All my life, I believed my burden was singular. But then, the rage was quickly eclipsed by a powerful, alien surge of instinctual, familial protectiveness, his core strength activating for the first time on behalf of someone else. The plot shifted completely. Kael's core misbelief, power must be solitary, was challenged by a biological imperative, the wolf demanding protection for its kin. That's why the stakes were now higher and intensely personal. This wasn't about the pack's stability anymore, it was about saving his sister. But then, the protective surge was immediately interrupted. His comm unit flashed red. An emergency notification from the sanctuary border guard. Reese's voice, filtered through static, broke the silence. Alpha. Perimeter breach at the fringe. Unauthorized movement. We are mobilizing to neutralize the rogue element. The alert was official, but Reese's tone was too calm, too clinical. Reese was eliminating the threat Kael had lied about. As if pulled by a string, Kael knew Reese recognized the danger Maya posed to his ambition and was attempting a clean, surgical strike. Kael had to move.
Now.
Chapter 12. The Intervention. Kael didn't wait to shift. He ran, a blur of human muscle, from the citadel to the fringe sanctuary, covering ground in reckless, desperate strides. The scent of ozone and adrenaline was sharp in his own nostrils. He arrived just as Reese's covert team, for heavily armed, loyal subordinates, was breaching the outer wards. They were his pack, his people, but then their intent was clear: the elimination of his blood. "Stand down," Kael roared, his voice amplified by Alpha Command, a primal sound that shook the very foundation of the derelict warehouse. The men froze, recognizing the authority, but then one, a large brute named Boren, recovered quickly. "Alpha, we are following the Beta's standing orders, purifying the lineage of the threat." Reese had left contingency orders. Kael knew Reese had planned this, knowing Kael would be distracted by his research. He was fueled by adrenaline and a desperate, internal need to protect his bloodline, a feeling he'd never known before. Kael didn't argue. He engaged, acting purely on instinctual protection rather than calculating power. The fight was brutal, fast, and tragically intimate. Kael fought his own pack, using only enough force to incapacitate. He used his unique alpha strength, his speed, his ability to read their intentions, to disable them quickly. As the air thickened with the scent of fear and ozone, Kael slammed Boren into a concrete support, knocking him senseless. The battle ended in less than a minute. Kael stood panting over his defeated subordinates, his hands slick with their blood, not his own. He rushed into Maya's chamber. She was huddled, terrified, holding her daughter tightly, her dark eyes wide. "They're gone," Kael gasped, struggling to catch his breath. "We have to move.
Now."
Kael publicly chose family/kinship over solitary control. His actions were undeniable. He had violently engaged his own pack to save an outsider. His schism with Reese was now unavoidable and visible. He was now undeniably an outcast from his own ideal of the Alpha. Without another word, Kael scooped up the frightened child and gently pulled Maya toward the exit. He carried the weight of his sister and niece, and the crushing knowledge that the truth was now out. Kael knew Reese had failed this assassination attempt, but then the Beta had successfully forced Kael's hand. He was on the offensive, and he had to take his kin directly into the belly of the beast. The Citadel was the only place left to secure his future. Chapter 13. The Defiance. The atmosphere inside the Alpha Citadel was no longer merely cold, it was hostile. Kael brought Maya and her daughter, Lyra, through the main gates in broad daylight. This was not a rescue, it was a declaration of war against tradition. Kael walked, every muscle in his back tight, feeling the weight of hundreds of silent stares. The pack members were lining the halls, their sense a confused mix of fear, shock, and mounting indignation. He needed to demonstrate he was still Alpha and force the pack to accept the new reality of the fragmented bloodline. He felt resolved and emotionally raw, but committed to this new, dangerous path. He led Maya and Lyra not to the dungeons or the secret rooms, but to a heavily guarded area within the perimeter, the old consort's wing, a place symbolizing family and legacy, which was now a deliberate, public defiance of pack tradition. "You are safe here," Kael told Maya, his voice low. His hand hovered near her shoulder, a gesture of protection he hadn't yet earned the right to complete. As the bond pulsed between them, a strange warmth, he saw the doubt in her dark eyes. "She is human, and I am risking her life for my war." But then he had to risk it. Because of that, he was willing to risk civil war to protect his sister. This act was his definitive commitment. He left his sister in the care of his two most trusted, oldest loyalists, a choice that showed everyone exactly where his priority lay. Soon after, Kael stood before the assembled elders and high-ranking members, the same ones he had effortlessly commanded in Act 1. Their faces were carved in stone, their scents laced with judgment. "This is Maya," Kael announced, his voice ringing with authority. She is blood. She is the living proof that our lineage was not extinguished, but deliberately fragmented. What followed was not rebellion, but silence, a far more dangerous response. An old elder, his face a road map of ancient prejudice, finally spoke, his voice gravelly. The mark symbolizes the supreme alpha, Kael, not the stray dog brought in from the human wilds. Your emotional investment compromises your fitness to lead. Kael felt the familiar, cold pressure of absolute power demanding he execute this elder, yet he stood firm. He was fighting for a unified future, not solitary dominance. He left the room, his attempted reasoning met only with frosty silence and veiled disgust. Chapter 14. The Failed Appeal. The air in the citadel was thick with the scent of coming conflict. Kael found Rhys in the courtyard, overseeing an aggressive training session with his subfaction. Rhys was not surprised to see Kael. He was waiting. Kael needed to reason with his subordinate and avoid a full-scale conflict. He wanted to appeal to the tactical mind he respected. I know you attacked the sanctuary, Kael stated, bypassing the formalities. Rhys stopped the training, turning slowly. His eyes were cold, devoid of the emotion he usually feigned. He was calm, confident, and utterly ruthless. I followed my duty, Alpha, Rhys said, his voice flat. I tried to remove the threat you introduced. The woman is an existential risk to our entire isolation protocol. Not only that, your decision to bring her here publicly is a terminal weakness. Kael leaned forward, keeping his voice dangerously low. The runestone revealed the truth. The crest means unity, Rhys. We were all deceived. This isn't a threat. It's a chance to consolidate our bloodline, to finally stabilize our history. Rhys laughed, a dry, chilling sound. Unity? Alpha, you mistake sentiment for strategy. You are weakened. Your judgment is compromised by a human-raised taint. The pack does not need unity. It needs an absolute, solitary hand, because anything else is chaos. Rhys's rejection was absolute. Kael felt despair and betrayal that his strongest tactical mind wouldn't accept the kinship. Rhys wasn't ambitious for power itself. He was ideologically opposed to Kael's change. As a result, the path to peaceful resolution was irrevocably shut down. Kael had committed himself to family, and Rhys had committed himself to elimination. You have sealed your fate, Rhys, Kael warned. Rhys merely shrugged, the movement casual. Perhaps. But in doing so, I saved the Vanguard from your delusion. Without thinking, Kael felt his teeth ache with the desire to shift and end this now, but he held back. He had to win the pack, not just the fight. Rhys abruptly cut the conversation short, turning back to his training unit, dismissing his alpha entirely. Kael stood alone, watching his second-in-command assume leadership right in front of him. Hours later, the official declaration arrived, a single, folded parchment delivered by an anonymous junior wolf. Chapter 15. The Challenge. Kael unfolded the parchment in the silence of his study. The parchment was sealed with the official wax of the pack judiciary, ensuring its legality. It was the challenge of supremacy, formally initiated by Beta Rhys. The charges were clear: compromised judgment, failure to protect pack secrecy, and the introduction of a tainted element into the citadel. The date was set for the sacred gathering grounds, a massive ceremonial ring outside the citadel perimeter, where the challenge could be witnessed by every faction. MP's goal and emotional state: to prepare for war and protect Maya. Kael was calmly furious, the cold, precise fury of an alpha who realizes he has truly crossed the point of no return. The conflict had escalated to the highest possible level, a duel for the pack's leadership, for the right to exist for Maya and Lyra, and for the soul of the Vanguard itself. Kael knew Rhys was strong. His beta was a master tactician, and he had the support of every traditionalist wolf who feared change. Kael began making preparations. He called his remaining loyalists, the few who believed his word, the few who hadn't fallen for Rhys's propaganda. He issued orders that clearly separated them from Rhys's subfaction, creating a dangerous line in the sand. Because of that, Every step Kael took now was a risk. He visited Maya, standing quietly in the doorway of the consort's wing. The room was warm, filled with the scent of the strange, peaceful human life he had stolen and was now risking everything to keep. "Reese has formally challenged me," Kael said simply. Maya didn't scream or cry. She walked toward him, her hands steady. As the silence roared in Kael's ears, she looked up, her expression a mix of fear and fierce resolve. "What does that mean for Lyra? And for you?" "It means I will fight him," Kael replied. "I fight to change the meaning of the mark. To prove that blood and kinship are not weakness. That solitary rule is the true sickness." He needed her to understand the weight of his choice. Her voice trembled slightly. "Then win, Alpha. Don't fight to command. Fight to protect." Kael felt his chest ache with an emotion he didn't recognize, a blend of duty and fierce, aching need. He hadn't just committed to a path, he had been given a new purpose. Time was running out, and Kael knew the next time he saw Reese, they would be fighting for survival. Chapter 16. The Devastating Preemption. Kael was in the war room with his few loyalists, the old quartermaster, 2 perimeter guards, and his personal physician, Dr. Lenore. They were finalizing defense logistics for the upcoming challenge, but then the challenge was still 2 days away. Kael felt a grim, focused determination, and a strange new calmness since Maya's words had shifted his focus. Without warning, the Citadel's systems went dark. The emergency alarms, usually a piercing siren, failed entirely. The lights cut out, plunging the war room into suffocating blackness. What followed was the sickening, sharp scent of burning plastic and ozone, accompanied by muffled human screams from the eastern wing, the power core, and the communications array. Kael roared, recognizing the cold precision of the attack. Reese hadn't attacked the perimeter or Kael directly. Reese had targeted Kael's non-fighting advisors, the core infrastructure, the administrative brains that ran the Citadel. Reese knew Kael's loyalty to the system ran deep, and that Kael would fight to save the functionaries he relied on. Kael and his loyalists raced through the suddenly dark, echoing corridors. He watched his inner circle be decimated by his own former subordinate. The administrative wing was a scene of calculated chaos, not a fight, but an execution. Reese's subfaction moved with terrifying speed, destroying records, shattering communication nodes, and isolating Kael's most trusted, non-fighting advisors. Kael needed to retaliate and save his loyalists. But he was too late. He fought a handful of Reese's wolves, his rage a blinding curtain, but then the damage was done. The command structure was severed. Dr. Lenore, the quartermaster, and the 2 guards were cut off, overwhelmed, or worse. He felt profound shock and guilt at how his focus on Maya, the secret he had to protect, allowed this public catastrophe to happen. As the echo faded, Kael realized the extent of Reese's tactical brilliance. Reese had effectively isolated Kael. His command structure was broken, his intelligence network was blind, and his power base was critically damaged. Kael was forced to flee the Citadel with Maya and Lyra, barely escaping the ambush. He snatched them from the consort's wing just as Reese's cleanup team breached the door. He ran, not as the Alpha, but as the fugitive, carrying the burden of his failure and the lives of his new, fragile family. Chapter 17. Retreat and Loss. The remote, unstable borderlands near the sanctuary were hostile. The air smelled of damp pine and cold fear. Kael, Maya, Lyra, and a handful of surviving loyalists, only 3 of the guards, sought dangerous refuge here, hiding in a cave beneath a dense canopy of ancient trees. Kael sat in the cold silence, feeling defeated. He watched his breath mist in the cave air. He had lost the solitary power he valued. His citadel was occupied, and his pack was split by his own cousin. He was no longer the undisputed Alpha, he was a liability. He needed to ensure the survival of Maya and the few who remain. But the failure was heavy, an overwhelming physical force. He felt utter failure and deep loss. All that remains is the unfamiliar, frightening burden of his new family. With his scent in the air, thick with exhaustion and failure, Kael overheard a tense, frightened argument erupting at the cave entrance. He chose the human. He chose the taint over the stability of the Vanguard. It was Jorik, one of the perimeter guards who had barely escaped the preemption. His voice was low, but laced with panic. The challenge is a trap. Rhys has the Citadel. Kael has a woman and a child. We should leave now. The other guard, Alara, hissed back. He is the Alpha. He is blood. He was the Alpha, Jorik retorted. He traded his absolute power for a myth. She didn't know what scared her more, the loss of the Citadel or the doubt in Jorik's voice. Kael didn't move. The words were knives, slicing through his remaining authority. He realized they were starting to doubt his leadership and his choice of family over the Pack's future. His world tilted. He had sought kinship, but then had only achieved a deeper, more profound isolation, dragging innocence down with him. His lowest point was rapidly approaching. As the bond pulsed with an agonizing, confusing connection, Kael felt the need to apologize to Maya, but then he couldn't form the words. He was a failure. He had traded absolute control for a vulnerability he wasn't prepared for. Chapter 18: Dark Night of the Soul. That night, Kael left the sleeping camp, hiking to the edge of the borderlands. He shifted into his massive wolf form, staring out over the glittering, meaningless urban lights that bordered their world, a beacon of the very chaos he had sought to contain. He was just a wolf now, driven by instinct, stripped of his title and his security. His bones remembered him as the Alpha, the king of the Citadel, but now he was nothing. Maya found him there, wrapped in a thin blanket one of the guards had given her. She stood quietly, letting him have his space, letting him be the raw, powerful animal he currently was. Kael shifted back to human, the process aching with exhaustion, and he didn't bother to clothe himself fully. She didn't approach him with anger, but with quiet resignation. Her dark eyes were full of compassion, a dangerous, confusing emotion. "Jorik is right, isn't he?" she whispered, her voice barely carrying over the forest sounds. "We are the reason they were hurt. I will leave, Kael. I will go back to the city. No one will ever find the mark again. If I leave, you can go back, fight Rhys on their terms, and save your pack." Kael felt utter despair. Her self-sacrificial offer was the ultimate test. His attempt to gain kinship had only resulted in isolation and the destruction of his world. Kael felt a renewed resolve and humility. He was the Alpha, trained for centuries of battle, yet she had spotted the tactical blind spot in Rhys's defenses instantly, the reliance on rigid, Citadel-focused protocol. He realized he had never valued her input, and he realized his own strength had been limited by his arrogance. As the bond pulsed with an agonizing, confusing connection, it was now mixed with a wave of deep, new trust. Kael actively sought and valued Maya's input, fully utilizing her as an intellectual equal and solidifying his personal transformation. Soon after, Kael called his 3 loyalists, Jorik, Alara, and the younger guard, into the clearing. They were stunned by his changed demeanor and Maya's presence next to him, not behind him, but beside him. Chapter 20: The Unification Plan. The 3 loyalists stood stiffly, their eyes darting between Kael and Maya. Kael knew his appeal had to be raw, and it had to be absolute. "Rhys has the Citadel," Kael began, his voice low, drawing their full attention. "He has the walls and the weapons. He has the old way." He paused, letting the fear and the truth hang in the cool morning air. He needed to not only defeat Rhys, but to fundamentally change the Pack's core belief about leadership and lineage. "We are not attacking the Citadel," Kael continued. "We are going to the sacred gathering grounds. We are answering the challenge. But we will not win by force alone." Kael outlined his final strategy. They would use Maya's civilian knowledge to evade Rhys's scouts and arrive at the sacred spot in a public demonstration. He spoke not of dominance, but of duty and honor. "Rhys claims I am tainted," Kael said, pointing to the silvery mark on Maya's shoulder, which was now visible. "He claims this mark is weakness. But then he lies. The ancient truth is this mark means unity. It means the Alpha bloodline is not singular, but whole." He looked at Jorik, who was still skeptical. You doubted me, Jorik, and you were right too. I failed you by prioritizing my power over the Pack's foundation. Now, I am asking you to fight for something larger than my throne, to fight for the truth of the Vanguard. Kael's final strategy was thematic. It proved his internal transformation was complete. He was risking his life to prove his new philosophy, and he was using his discovered kin as the ultimate political statement. As the silence roared, Alara, the female guard, was the first to shift her stance, her eyes blazing with renewed conviction. We fight for the Vanguard, Alpha, she stated, her scent snapping with loyalty. The other two followed, their doubt replaced by commitment. Kael's goal was achieved. He gave a quiet, powerful speech to his handful of loyalists, speaking not of dominance, but of duty and honor, and earning their total commitment. Chapter 21: The Approach. The journey back was tense. They moved by foot, utilizing the hidden routes Maya knew from years of avoiding attention in the borderlands. Kael felt a sense of calm, focused readiness. He was no longer running from the Citadel, he was running toward his destiny. They used human world cover, abandoned utility tunnels, and dense commercial forestry to evade Reese's surveillance. Because of that, Kael relied entirely on Maya's sharp instincts and her knowledge of the civilian world to navigate. His alpha senses, trained to read scent and territory, were useless here. He was learning to trust her competence over his own power. As the bond pulsed with a strong, urgent heat, Kael realized he was more afraid for Maya and Lyra than he was for the outcome of the fight. He had everything to lose, a family he had just found. They reached the crest of the final hill, overlooking the sacred gathering grounds. Below, the ancient ceremonial ring glowed under the weak morning light. Reese's faction was already there, massed and waiting, their sense thick with anticipation and cold hatred. Reese himself stood at the center, radiating absolute, solitary power. Kael paused, putting a protective hand on Maya's shoulder. From here, it is a straight walk. No more hiding. Maya gripped his arm, her small hand surprisingly strong. Her world tilted toward the battle, but then she straightened, ready. We walk together, she vowed. Kael looked at his handful of loyalists, then at the human woman and the child beside him. He was a fugitive alpha, leading a broken faction, carrying a secret that could destroy his pack. He was fighting for an idea, but then he had never felt so unified, so powerful. He had chosen the way of kinship. As if fate demanded it, Kael shifted. His massive black wolf form appeared, powerful and scarred, and he stood tall on the hill. He looked down at the gathering grounds, at the enemy who sought to eliminate his blood. He howled, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the mountain passes, a sound not of solitary rule, but of defiant return. The time for talking was over. The time for the challenge was now. Chapter 22: The Grand Entrance. The final howl faded, swallowed by the cold mountain air. Kael, magnificent and terrifying in his full alpha form, a massive wolf of obsidian muscle and gold eyes, led the descent into the sacred gathering grounds. He was the lightning, and Maya was the thunder. Reese's assembled pack, hundreds of wolves, were already at the ring, massed into a solid, hostile wall of gray and brown fur. The air thickened with their collective hatred and the crushing scent of Reese's metallic dominance. They were the old guard, terrified of change because they believed change meant destruction. Instead of leading the attack, Kael stopped 50 feet from Reese, and he deliberately shifted back to human, standing naked and bleeding slightly before the entire pack. It was an act of extreme vulnerability, a challenge to the spirit of their law. He needed to assert his legitimacy through blood and honor. With every step he took, Maya followed. She held Lyra's hand, the small girl clutching a simple, woven flower. This was Kael's public statement. He was not alone. He was unity. As the space between them burned, Reese, already shifted to his imposing, silver-dusted wolf form, lunged forward, snarling with pure ideological fury. You bring the taint here, Kael. You sacrificed the Vanguard for a human mistake. Kael didn't shift back immediately. He stood firm, meeting Rhys's fury with cold, hard resolve. I bring the truth, Rhys. A truth you eliminated for the sake of your ambition. Without thinking, Kael hurled the runestone he'd retrieved in Act 4. It clattered loudly on the ancient stone ring. The mark means unity. You are the mistake, Rhys, because you confuse fear for strength. Rhys lunged, his timing perfect. Kael finally shifted, meeting Rhys's brute force with his own obsidian power. The duel was instant, brutal, and tragically intimate. Rhys fought with calculated, solitary aggression, aimed to sever Kael's central authority. Kael fought with a new, primal energy, protectively, positioning himself constantly between Rhys and Maya. Rhys was faster, but then Kael was more resilient, fueled by the unfamiliar strength of kinship. He landed a brutal tear on Kael's flank. Kael staggered, the scent of his blood sharp on the wind, but then he saw Maya standing firm, refusing to run. Kael needed to defeat Rhys physically, but also politically. He used a defensive sweep, knocking Rhys off balance. Rhys struggled to regain his footing, and Kael pressed his advantage, using his weight to pin Rhys, not to wound. Rhys fell, defeated, pinned beneath Kael's massive weight. Kael had him. The final, fatal bite was expected. The pack held its breath. The tension broke. Chapter 23. Forgiveness and Command. Kael's jaws were around Rhys's throat, but then he did not bite. He paused, his breath ragged, staring down at the struggling, defeated Beta. The silence in the gathering grounds was absolute. He felt controlled, powerful, and deeply committed. I spare you, Kael growled, forcing the pack to witness his choice. Not for weakness, but because I fight for unity, not elimination. Kael stepped back, releasing Rhys. He shifted, naked, bloody, and utterly triumphant. He walked straight past the stunned Rhys, straight toward Maya and Lyra. He took Maya's hand. He put his bloody, powerful hand over the silvery mark on her shoulder. He faced the assembled pack. As the bond pulsed with a strong, urgent heat, Kael addressed the assembly, his voice raw but amplified by the Alpha command. The age of the solitary Alpha is over, Kael commanded. Rhys's way is the lie that almost destroyed us. Maya is blood. She is kinship. She is our strength. He turned to Rhys, who lay defeated. You are stripped of your rank, Rhys. You will leave the Citadel and serve the pack by patrolling the borderlands for 5 years. You will protect the Vanguard from the outside, and you will learn what it means to defend what you cannot command. Kael chose unification over elimination, demonstrating mercy and strength. Without another word, Kael scooped up Lyra in one arm and held Maya's hand firmly. He presented them as the legitimate, vital part of the unified lineage. The pack, witnessing Kael's moral ascendancy and the resolution of his internal flaw, lowered their heads in submission. Kael felt a sense of profound, earned peace and responsibility. The pack accepted the new reality through Kael's demonstration of mercy and strength, accepting the messy truth of their lineage. Chapter 24. New Equilibrium. 6 months later. The scent of fresh-cut cedar and new paint replaced the cold iron in the Citadel. It was rebuilt, but then it was changed. The austere formality was gone. The massive windows Kael had always kept shuttered were now open, letting in the strong mountain sunlight. The atmosphere was less military, more functional and open. Kael was in his study, but he wasn't alone. He was going over boundary reports, and Maya sat across the table, reviewing data on external human politics, her expertise now essential to their safety. The governor's office is asking about the land transfer again, Maya noted, tapping a stylus on a tablet. We need to address them with transparency, because hiding only confirms their suspicions. Kael's goal was to successfully integrate his old life and his new family. He watched her, a woman who had taught the Alpha King the meaning of sight. With every heartbeat, he felt secure, purposeful, and finally not alone. Transparency, Kael repeated, a concept that would have made his old self recoil. He nodded. Draft the response, consort. He used the title softly, letting the weight of the words settle between them, a title that represented shared rule, not silent servitude. He paused, looking at his large, dark hand. It was no longer stained with the blood of civil war, but with the ink of human reports. He smiled, a genuine, rare expression. As if summoned, Lyra burst into the room, clinging to his leg, her small, powerful scent of childhood and new pack loyalty filling the air. Kael knelt, picking up his daughter. In that moment, the mark he once believed symbolized singular dominance now symbolized the messy, powerful bond of family and the truth that strength is found in shared commitment, not solitary control. Kael looked at Maya, his consort, his sister, his equal. "I wouldn't trade this chaos for the quiet of my old throne, consort," he murmured. Maya smiled, and the space between them burned with the gentle heat of lasting love. Epilogue scene. Kael stands alone at the highest point of the citadel, which is now open and overlooking the human city, not closed off. The wind whips around him, smelling of pine and distant urban life. He touches the Alpha Crest on his chest. It no longer feels like a burden of singularity, but a quiet promise of a future built on shared rule. The stone is warm because his core is no longer frozen. He closes his eyes, savoring the silence, the fleeting moment of solitude. But it is a chosen solitude, not a forced one. Her world tilted from the terror of the capture to the quiet peace of this moment. He hears the faint, domestic sounds from the wing below, Maya's light laughter, the clatter of a bowl, Lyra arguing playfully about carrots. They are planning a simple, human meal. Kael walks away from the solitary peak, back toward the sound of his family, stepping out of the shadows and into the difficult light of true kinship. The door closes quietly behind him. And just like that, everything changed.